Berlin, May 1945. People expected silence when the war ended. Instead, the city woke to a different kind of noise, a steady, unsettling mix of crumbling stone, crying children, and the engines of foreign tanks rolling through streets that no longer resembled a functioning capital. The fighting had stopped, but the aftermath had only begun. For years, many believed the war would end in one dramatic moment, a final explosion followed by quiet. But when the Nazi regime collapsed, Germany did not fall into silence, it fell into shock. Everywhere, buildings stood torn open, their interiors exposed to the sky. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Roads twisted unpredictably beneath broken rail lines and debris. When survivors stepped out of basements and shelters, they moved slowly, blinking at the daylight. The world outside seemed unfamiliar. What had once been homes, schools, and shops were now the remains of a destroyed nation. People walked through the ruins as if searching for the outlines of the lives they once lived. A young mother pushed a damaged cart through what used to be her street. Her daughter held on to the edge, covered in ash. The structures around them, burned, collapsed, and silent, felt like reminders of a life that no longer existed. Soviet soldiers marched past, worn from years of fighting and carrying the weight of what they had endured on the Eastern Front. The mother kept her eyes down. Most civilians did. Survival demanded focus, not attention to passing troops. Hunger arrived even faster than the occupying armies. Food supplies had collapsed in the final months of the war. People searched the ruins for anything they could eat. Scraps burned in old ovens, grain scattered across bomb sites, potatoes buried beneath destroyed kitchens. Many avoided certain streets because the air still carried the unmistakable smell of bodies trapped under rubble. Not long after, another group appeared among the ruins. Families from the east, driven out or fleeing the front, arrived with little more than what they could carry. They expected refuge, but instead faced a population already struggling to survive. Locals worried that sharing what little they had might take their own families past the breaking point. Tension grew quietly between people who were all living through the same disaster. As the country tried to understand its new reality, the map of Germany changed overnight. British troops entered the northwest, American forces moved into the south, French units settled into the west, and the Soviet Union took control of the east, including Berlin. Each region faced its own challenges, but the Soviet-occupied zone carried an atmosphere of constant fear. Many Red Army soldiers had witnessed the destruction of their own homes and towns. The war had taken everything from them, and some sought revenge for what Germany had done. In damaged neighborhoods, whispers spread about houses stormed at night and families hiding in attics, cellars, or anything that could be barricaded. Women disguised themselves by cutting their hair or covering their faces with dirt. Entire communities lived on edge, uncertain of what each night might bring. Elsewhere, the situation unfolded with a different kind of pressure. Allied officers took over usable buildings for administrative purposes and housing. Families were told to leave with only minutes to gather belongings. Many stepped into streets with no idea where they would sleep next. The war was over, but control of their lives had not returned. Then came an even more difficult task, confronting the truth. Across Germany, civilians were brought to liberated camps, Dachau, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen. Many had never seen the inside of these places. Some had heard rumors, but nothing prepared them for the reality. People walked through the gates in disbelief, covering their mouths as they saw what remained. A few insisted it must be staged. Others stood frozen, unable to process the scale of the suffering that had occurred so close to their own homes. In theaters, documentary footage of the camps was shown. Audiences sat in stunned silence as scenes of mass graves and starving prisoners filled the screen. Afterward, few spoke. Many left quickly. The emotional weight of what they saw settled heavily over the population. Meanwhile, everyday life remained a struggle. Coal was scarce, and people took it from whatever abandoned sources they could find. Trees disappeared from parks as families chopped them down for heat. Furniture became firewood. Books once kept for learning were burned for survival. The winter forced everyone to make choices they never imagined. Water pumps became gathering places, though some produced water that was unsafe to drink. Still, people drank it. They had no other choice. As evening fell, the streets grew dangerous. With no functioning police force and almost no lighting, anyone desperate enough could steal, intimidate, or disappear into the ruins. The shadows felt alive with uncertainty. Yet even in a nation so damaged, resilience surfaced. Women became central to the rebuilding effort. With so many men killed or imprisoned, they cleared the streets by hand. They climbed mountains of rubble, carrying bricks and stones in long human chains. Dust covered them from head to toe, but every piece they moved brought the city one small step closer to recovery. They were soon known as the rubble women, a term that would eventually symbolize hope in a devastated country. At the same time, German soldiers held in prison camps slowly returned home. Many came back thin, tired, and unsure of what they waited for. Some came back to houses that no longer existed. Others found families that had changed or disappeared. Few spoke openly about what they had seen. Silence became a common way of coping with experiences that felt impossible to share. As winter arrived, the situation grew harder. Homes with shattered windows offered little warmth. Blankets could not keep out the cold. Entire families slept in basements or huddled around weak fires. Children fell ill. Older residents struggled to survive nights that were colder than any they remembered. But time, slow and uneven, continued forward. The recovery did not begin with large announcements or major plans. It began with small moments. A bakery reopened, filling a single street with the smell of fresh bread again. A teacher unlocked a damaged classroom, wiped dust from a desk, and prepared a lesson for children who had not been in school for months. A train rumbled carefully down a repaired track, gathering passengers who stared out of broken windows with cautious hope. Recovery revealed itself in quiet scenes. A woman waited at a relief station and finally held a warm cup of soup between her hands. A soldier stepped into his neighborhood and was met not with blame, but with a simple, forgiving nod from someone who had known him before the war. In one classroom, a teacher opened an old textbook and realized they would be rebuilding education from the ground up. And across the city, a family finally slept through a night uninterrupted. No air raid sirens, no explosions, no unexpected knocks at the door. For the first time in years, the darkness outside felt still. Recovery came through daily decisions, quiet acts of endurance. There was no single moment when the country suddenly changed direction. Instead, it rebuilt itself piece by piece, guided by people who wanted to create something better than what had led them to war. So what was life like in Germany immediately after the fall of the Nazis? It was destruction and survival, fear and resilience, grief and responsibility. Cities lay in ruins, families were scattered. The future felt uncertain, yet people pushed forward anyway, shaping a new identity from the remains of a broken nation. There was no instant rebirth, only the slow, demanding work of learning how to live again. And in that effort, a new Germany began to emerge, rebuilt by the steady hands and stubborn hope of its people.